after his disastrous announcement on Twitter Spaces that was riddled with technical issues and wasn't any sort of profound speech on the part of DeSantis, all around a disaster, as we discussed yesterday. He went on Fox News for his first interview since his official campaign announcement, and wasn't great either. And I want to walk you through some moments from this interview, a lot of what we've heard for a while now from DeSantis, and we'll start with this moment.
First of all, the woke mind virus is basically a form of cultural Marxism. At the end of the day, it's an attack on the truth. And because it's a war on truth, I think we have no choice but to wage a war on woke. So how does that work for a president? Some of it may be the bully pulpit, being willing to tell the truth and not being deluded by ideology, which we see in many aspects of our society.
So the Ron DeSantis campaign, that is the war on woke. I shouldn't be surprised, and I'm not surprised, but it's still interesting to me that this is the direction he's going to go with his presidential campaign. I guess he feels as if this worked in Florida, and he did get a big gubernatorial victory, but I just don't see this translating, the obsession with a term and a concept that is so nebulous, that doesn't tap into real issues facing Americans, and the boogeyman of wokeness is so both abstract and often just detached from reality, detached from actual, as I said, issues, actual concerns of people, that how this will move enough voters beyond just the kind of anti-woke obsessive base maybe, but outside of that, outside of those who are constantly obsessing over that, I don't see this as something that reaches out to independents in a general election, for example, or even just in this Republican primary. Trump is also really anti-woke, and so are all the Republicans. So if that's your big thing, how does that set you apart from Trump? But most importantly, and what bothers me about the obsession with fighting against this nebulous, pointless concept, at least in their definition of it, is it's not actually doing any good, any work to benefit the lives of people. It's not actually bringing to the table policy proposals, policy positions that we can debate, that we can discuss, and instead it's just fighting against a straw man, and that's really all it ends up being. Next moment from this interview.
All right, you wore the uniform. If you are elected president, you may be the first one in a while to have worn the uniform. How would you address the ongoing war in Eastern Europe between Russia and Ukraine on day one of a Ron DeSantis presidency?
Well, first, I think what we need to do as a veteran is recognize that our military has become politicized. You talk about gender ideology, you talk about things like global warming that they're somehow concerned in. That's not the military that I served in. We need to return our military to focusing on commitment, focusing on the core values and the core mission. That would be something that I could take care of on day one. There'll be a new sheriff in town as commander-in-chief, and I think you'll see recruiting start to get back to where it needs to be, because people don't want to join a woke military, and I think it's been really, really problematic. Look, in terms of what's going on over in Eastern Europe, I'd like to see a settlement of this. I do not want to see a wider war. I think it's completely unknowable what it will look like in January of 2025, but I would not want to see the United States with our troops get enmeshed in a war in Russia or in Ukraine.
So starting from the beginning of DeSantis' answer, he gets asked about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As president, what would you do? What would be your action in supporting Ukraine? Or would you go away from the policy of supporting Ukraine? Do you differ from Biden on that? Where do you stand in comparison to Trump? And his response is, first, I think we need to do as a veteran is recognize that our military has become politicized. You talk about gender ideology, and then he goes on. Gender ideology, really? That's what you're bringing up when asked about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's just meaningless. And then he throws in the word woke again, of course, because he's a one-trick pony. And how anyone takes this seriously, I honestly don't understand. Because there are real issues that a president is going to have to face and contend with and make decisions on. And one of them has to do with how will the United States play a role in supporting Ukraine. When he finally gets around to answering the question, he just says, I guess he doesn't want the war to escalate. He doesn't want the United States to get involved directly, militarily. Well, Biden has said the same thing. So the only specific position you've taken is something that Biden agrees with. We're not going to get directly militarily involved. We're not going to have troops fighting in Ukraine. But he doesn't even address the big debate right now, which is some within the right, the MAGA right, some on the left, but many right now within kind of the Trump right, and definitely it was a big Tucker Carlson talking point, Marjorie Greene and many others are saying that Biden shouldn't be supporting Ukraine. And so where do you stand on that, DeSantis? Because as I've said before, I am very much on the side of supporting Ukraine financially and in military aid and other aid, as Biden has been doing. And DeSantis, just like how he has very little courage when trying to distinguish himself from Trump, criticize Trump, he also has very little courage here to take a position, to clearly explain what he would do in regard to this very serious conflict, this war, and instead it's gender ideology and wokeness. Last moment we'll look at from this interview.
I don't mind being called different things. I've been called everything but a child of God as it is. So that doesn't faze me. You can call me whatever you want. Just make sure you call me a winner, because that's what we've done in the state of Florida. And that's exactly what we would do nationally, not only in the election, but actually bringing all these great policies to bear.
So we've heard that one from him before, and I'll just kind of be clear with y'all on different answers like this as we go through this primary. I think that's a fine way to go about it, at least in a reasonable world. And that's what you kind of have to always calibrate your brain to say, though, because I think taking the I'm above it stance, oh, listen, you can call me whatever you want, but I'm a winner, even though when DeSantis says it's a little cringe. But I get that that's kind of an effective talking point in response. But that's not what the MAGA base wants. And taking the I'm above these childish attacks, even though to me the alternative of being childish back would be not the correct way to go about it, but maybe that's the way that is effective for dealing with Trump. I really don't know, but we'll see how DeSantis continues to deal with that. And one other thing I want to look at before we wrap up on these DeSantis moments is from a different interview during a radio interview with Chris Ryan, where he gets asked about his culture of losing talking point. He's been saying that the GOP has developed a culture of losing and how that directly references Trump. Take a look at this.
You said that there's a culture of losing which has infected the Republican Party. Is Donald Trump basically the godfather of that culture?
Well, I don't know if to say that per se. I mean, I think what we've seen over many years is certainly losing elections. We've been doing that the last three cycles, no question. But even before that, I mean, even when we would win elections, we wouldn't actually win on the policy battles. And at the end of the day, yeah, you got to win. If you can't win, don't even worry about showing up.
We talked in the past about him getting asked the same question and not necessarily wanting to hear himself say Donald Trump lost, because he knows that'll make a lot of the base mad. But he does want to get in their mind that, listen, Trump is not going to lead you to victory in a general election. And again, logically, that seems like a strategic approach. Now, what I mean by that is trying to say, listen, whether or not you like Trump, whether or not you like the other candidates in the race, I'm the winner, and that's why you need to pick me. I understand why that would be reasonable, but if you can't ever say Trump lost explicitly, or you're so afraid to say that, and it kind of has to be, well, just the last 3 election cycles, and even before that, we just lost even when we won, is not bringing the courage to the table that you would need to be successful in a situation like this. And that's, to me, a pattern, a characteristic of DeSantis's both pre-campaign and now actual presidential campaign, a lack of courage and a lack of an ability to really define himself as something that Republican voters would go for. But I'm not exactly the the type of voter he's trying to win over, obviously. So interesting stuff. So far, DeSantis's campaign is off to a very bad start.